over to you, Shauna.
Hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to be back with our next 10th anniversary talk. It's been a hard year and there's still so much going on, but we're really hoping to continue to connect, develop and inspire. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks for coming last time as well to see Sasha's talk. If you didn't manage to come to that talk, then it's over on our YouTube channel, so go and check that out. Whilst you're with us today, if you can just stick in the chat where you're from, that would be really cool to see where everyone's from. And if you've got any questions for Connie, then stick it in the Q&A, or if you've got any questions now, stick it in the Q&A. And yeah, we'll crack on.
Lovely. And just thanks again to Adidas and 510 for making it possible this year. It's so nice to have a really good relationship with people who understand what we want to do and share those values, and helping us to bring this event to you. As ever, we are on a social competition. So if you could post you tuning in today on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, tagging us and Adidas, Terex and 510 official, and the hashtag is WCS20, then we'll get in contact with the winners after the event today. Thank you, Shauna.
So today our guest is Connie Lightner, and I'm incredibly excited to hear Connie talk. So I first met Connie at a World Cup, I believe it was, or the World Championships. And if you've ever been at an event where her son Kai has been competing, you will have heard her. Her energy and enthusiasm when cheering is second to none. And I absolutely adore that energy, and it's so cool to see how passionate Connie is, and I just can't wait to hear what she's got to say today. Connie is an associate professor and chair of the Department of Management, Marketing and Entrepreneurship at the Fayetteville State University. That is a mouthful. As the mother of professional climber Kai Lightner, Connie played an instrumental role in guiding her son's success domestically and internationally. She possesses a unique understanding of the opportunities and challenges presented to climbing families. Additionally, Connie serves on the board of directors and the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Task Force for USA Climbing. That is another mouthful. Thank you so much for being here, Connie. I cannot wait to hear what you've got to say, so over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen first. Hold on. Okay. You know, I'm getting used to this whole technology thing with the lockdown and everything. When I was first asked and extended the invitation to speak with the Women's Climbing Symposium, I was a little confused because although I can boulder an amazing V0 plus, that's like, I think, a 4 on the font scale, I knew that no one would be interested in my climbing expertise. As a matter of fact, in recent years, I've kind of accepted that despite being accomplished in my own right in academia and with research, that my true claim to fame is being the mom of professional climber Kai Lightner. And I realized that it was in that capacity that this invitation was actually extended. With climbing being included in the Olympics, the role of parenting is 10 times more important today than it was years ago. Just like with gymnastics, when you have an Olympic sport, you're going to have kids that are going to be training at a higher level with high intensity, and that's going to introduce a lot of new dynamics to the sport. And to be honest, we cannot depend, or we shouldn't depend upon federations to be solely responsible for taking care of our kids and their long-term best interests. I've always had a belief with Kai that it's a coach's job to teach our kids to be the best climbers that they could be. But to be honest, it is a parent's job to make sure that our kids are the best people that they can be, and that their long-term best interest is something that we're looking out for overall. I think that In order for us to be able to do this, when we have ambitious young climbers in a young sport like climbing, it's kind of essential that parents understand both the pros and the cons associated with the sport. Because if you understand it, then we can make sure that our kids kind of realize the pros as much as possible, and we can kind of mitigate some of the cons in order to keep them okay and keep them protected. Some of the positive impacts of the sports that I absolutely love about it. The first one is just exercise and healthy practices. We live in a society where the kids love sitting inside all day long on the television, on their cell phones, playing video games. And with our kids, once they get addicted to climbing, that's what they want to do all the time. And in addition to that, my son has kind of pulled me into the whole organic phase and checking labels on food to make sure that there isn't junky stuff in it. That's a practice that he got me started with very young into the sport. And I think that's an aspect about it that I've always really loved and even enjoyed, that our kids actually care about exercising as well as what they eat on a daily basis. I think another positive in the community, there are a lot of really famous faces in these pictures. My kid grew up with the kids, and the community and the rock climbing community has always been something that is fantastic. I don't want to offend any of my hardcore climbers that are here, but to be honest, our climbing community is kind of filled with a lot of people that enjoy living out of their vans with like 2 changes of clothes for the whole month. And if we're going to be honest, there really isn't a lot of room for judgment when that's kind of the accepted lifestyle that's really enjoyed across the community. And that's an aspect that I love, because climbers tend to be pretty open about just differences. In the climbing community, if you like to climb and I like to climb, we're going to be friends. It's not unusual for kids to get like dropped off in the middle of a totally different country by themselves. And they're like completely confident that they're going to find someone that they can climb with and someplace to stay. That community aspect has always been a great thing in the climbing community. I think another thing is just the invaluable life skills that our kids learn. When adults, we have a lot of adults that the second they encounter adversity or they fail, it's like they collapse. They go into a state of depression. But I think in the climbing community, our kids have learned to master the art of failure and learning from it. The coaches and all of their trainers kind of teach them to constantly look at their failures and kind of just study them, and then go back and learn their weaknesses and practice and strengthen their weaknesses, and then kind of go back at the goal again. And they kind of repeat this cycle over and over again until they figure out how to accomplish their goal. Whether it's a route that they want to climb, a problem that they want to climb, or a desired result in the competition. These are just skills that will serve them for the rest of their lives. On the flip side, in addition to all the pros and the positive impacts of the sport, and I think that parents should constantly stress those positive impacts and make sure that our kids are enjoying and just realizing those impacts. But we also have to understand some of the pitfalls that are there so that we can just help our kids, protect them, and just mitigate some of those problems. A few things that come to mind is the fact that there is a thing of being too competitive in a sport, wanting to win at any cost. At the end of the day, a lot of young climbers tend to associate their results in a competition with their self-worth. It's a parent's job to make sure that those two issues are kind of decoupled. It's a parent's job to make sure that they maintain balance. Kids need playtime, they need study time for school in addition to training time. And no one's gonna make sure that that balance actually occurs better than a parent. And so it's our job to stay on top of that. And I think that it's important to teach our kids the importance of winning with grace and also losing with grace. And so whether they're winning or losing in a sport, I think that that's something that parents can do better than anyone, because we know our kids. Just making sure that that level of balance and sportsmanship is something that that stays. And it's pivotal for us to be involved for those reasons. Another one is eating disorders. I think that this is like a dirty little secret in the community that no one really wants to talk about, but in reality, it runs rampant. When Kai made the decision to actually speak out about an eating disorder that not many people knew that he has as a kid, he wrote an article for it. As parents, we need to understand that this is something that's common, and we need to understand some of the signals, some of the symptoms that would let us know that this is something that our kids might be suffering from. You can't ask them because they're not going to be honest. They're realizing short-time gains from actually doing it, and so they're going to hide it. And so it's important for us to kind of research on it. The article talks about some of it. If you Google this article, some of the things that I discovered, as well as how I kind of did an intervention in order to turn it around and kind of put them back on the right track. Coaches can't put down ultimatums, basically telling our kids that they're going to change certain behaviors, but as parents, we can. And this could be a deadly disorder. So it's important for us to know, understand it, and just help our kids kind of navigate through it. One of the last ones is injuries. Whenever you have young kids with open growth plates, they're training at a really, really high level, and they're having rapid growth spurts, it's like an instant recipe for disaster. And these are just a few of a lot of injuries that Kai's had. He's had 2 broken toes over his career. He's had 2 hand injuries. And one of the worst ones that I actually want to talk about a little bit to help you understand why it's important for us to be involved was the back injury that he actually had. We have to understand the sport and the impact that it has on our kids, because climbing is such a young sport that the research is low. And to be honest, doctors don't understand, a lot of doctors don't understand our sport or even how it impacts kids' bodies. Kai had a back injury back in, I want to say it was 2016. And when he had the injury, it was 4 or 5 weeks. They had done multiple x-rays and high-level exams, and they could not figure out what was wrong. I'm a researcher by trade, so I started digging through the research, looking for articles, trying to see, has anyone suffered similar symptoms to see if it's something that I can match up. I found one article out of the thousands that I actually combed through, hundreds that I've combed through. And that article was a climber that had very similar symptoms. I emailed the article to his doctor. The doctor used that to back up and reorder more MRI exams, but this time they wanted to do them from different angles. The reason why I'm mentioning this, had my son went to the doctor and told them that he was a weightlifter, doctors would have automatically taken the different angles and viewpoints for the MRI that would have been needed to instantly figure out what his problem was. However, they don't understand our sport. They don't understand the wear and tear on the different parts of the body. And so they did basic exams. And it's just important that we understand it so that we can kind of advocate for our kids a little more. If a doctor says that it takes 6 weeks for something to actually heal, you might want to add 3 to 4 weeks onto that. New bones and just, recently healed muscles, it just cannot handle the wear and tear that our kids put on their bodies. Unfortunately, throughout time, I have known a lot of very talented kids that their careers basically ended and they stopped climbing because they came back too quickly from injuries. And it reoccurred, but this time it was permanent. While a coach can't stop our kids from competing, we can. And so it's just important that we kind of just recognize some of the things that are out there, some of the things that we should be protecting our kids from, as well as a lot of the positive aspects of it so that they can enjoy it. I think that overall, this is an amazing sport. Our kids get to see the world. They get to become involved in a beautiful community. And it's a lot of wonderful aspects, but the role of parents in the sport cannot be overstated. We can't just pass that off to someone to kind of do for us. And as long as the coaches continue doing their amazing jobs and we stay on top of exactly what's going on, our kids can enjoy it, and they can enjoy it for decades to come, not just years, but decades to come. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Connie. We've got we had loads of questions submitted in advance for you, and we've got a few coming in today. So we'll go through those until you look ready to drop, and then, and then let you off the hook. One of the first ones is just following up from something you just said from Andrea. Is how did Kai injure his back?
We have no idea, and that was part of the problem. Had the doctors known that he fell in an exact way, they would have x-rayed that area more based upon the impact and how we fell. But literally, he woke up one day and was trying to lift his arms, and it just kind of hurt. So he went on in the gym. He didn't think it was a big deal. And progressively, it got worse to the point that he couldn't basically lift it beyond, level. It couldn't go, above his shoulder level. And we have no idea how or when it happened, but apparently it's something that built up in time that became increasingly, I guess, bad until we recognized it. And that made it harder to detect.
And I guess sudden growth spurts as well. I think you mentioned before that he grew incredibly fast. Do you think that was
I had 5-6 inch growth spurts over 6 month periods. And you cannot have growth spurts like that with open growth plates with kids without that increased risk of injury. Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. Question from Kumbi here on the DEI side. I think 2020 saw Black Lives Matter taking the center stage in the world. How have you supported Kai as a parent navigating the challenges that he's experienced in the sporting community? And do you have any other tips for parents?
To be honest, 2020 is when I first allowed Kai to speak out about some of the issues that he's encountered and just some of the things that's occurred. But Kai actually wrote his first blog on the topic in 2016 after the Charlottesville incident, when the president talked about there being, good people on both sides. I just wouldn't allow him to publish it. I wouldn't allow him to publish it because if you comb back through articles where Kai would be recognized like for being a young African-American making a difference in society, or in Black history, or just with different forums, and they would talk about how he was inspiring kids and even more minority climbers to come out, there would be a ton of very negative, hate-filled comments that he would get. And at 16, I just didn't want him to deal with it. At 21, he's much more mature. He understands a lot of the issues, and I supported him with actually speaking up, because it seems like society is ready to hear some of the comments. And I encourage him to be open, to be honest about it, but then also to be patient. And when I say patient, the things that we're seeing, it's not new. It's been happening. It's been happening for centuries. The problem is it's now being filmed, and everyone is at home to see the film and the video, and it's actually come front stage and center, which means that a lot of people have questions, and for them, this is something that's just occurred. And just getting them to understand the systemic as well as systematic issues in our community, it takes a little bit of patience. We have to have a little bit of back and forth, and even with educating. And the fact that they're open and asking the questions now, if you're open and you're asking, we're trying to be a little bit more patient with just helping people to understand it. And I think that the time has come, and I'm grateful that that's one thing that with everything that's going on that has come to the forefront. So hopefully the future will be brighter than a lot of things that has occurred in the past.
Fantastic, and it's just great to have him out there as a role model at this time for young climbers as well. Question from Ian about you advocating for the Belayers Union. Could you expand a little bit on this?
Oh my God. I have more belay hours than anyone ever. And I think that it's funny. You know, I've had one place that I went to in recent times that wouldn't let me belay because they had a rule that you had to be a climber. And it's like, I have way more belay hours than most. And it's been funny. It's been a blast. And that video caught me at the end of the day. I've told them about the hideous hikes that Kai has brought me on. And belayers definitely need to be more appreciated. Thankfully, at 21, my kid has finally gotten there. I think at 14, he was a little bit more of a spoiled brat, like I was supposed to be there. So we're getting there. We're getting there. And I think the Belayers Union is going to come. We're going to unite and demand a little bit more respect. Maybe even a sponsorship or two.
Andrea says, and the driving hours.
And the driving. He drives now, though. We are currently climbing out west. We did a 30-hour drive, and I may have done like 7 hours of the 30. It was fantastic. The best drive ever.
Who chooses the music?
Oh, I don't know if you remember, but Shauna, Kai is like a radio. He sings every song everywhere. And so I'm not even allowed to touch the music. He handles the DJ. I have full confidence in him for that one.
Amazing. Question from Helen. My daughter is an 18-year-old American paraclimber, and she's appreciated and been motivated so much by Kai and your long-term support of US Adaptive, now paraclimbing, through the years, attendance at their comps and support and training sessions. How can our overall community continue to expand and support the outreach for more diversity and inclusion?
The hope is, with the Black Lives Matter movement becoming front and center, even in our industry, we have more companies in the outdoor industry, I think, that have put up statements of support. And hopefully they'll actually put their dollars where their statements are. And with that, and Kai started his organization, Climbing for Change. His hope really wasn't just to be the main source, but to connect a lot of different sources that are out there. There are more resources, we hope, that are coming to basically support the adaptive community. I don't know if you guys have ever been to an adaptive competition, but it's one of the most amazing experiences. Just the camaraderie and just to see people pushing through things that are more difficult than we've ever been through. And it kind of put a lot of things in perspective. So we're hoping that even through our organizations and just a lot of organizations that are starting to get started to promote the diversity and inclusion, that things are going to be better, because we need more representation across the entire spectrum in climbing. And we want them to be a little bit more equal than before. There's a world championship for climbers. There should be a para climbing world championship always also. And we'd love for them to stay together. And so hopefully that advocating for that is something that's going to occur with this full diversity movement that is going on.
Fantastic. Emma's asking, what's your favorite climbing trip you've been on? Or belaying trip?
Oh no, the belaying trips I can't say are ever favorite. That's like something that you kind of grit and bear because you know he needs a belayer to be there with him. My favorite climbing trip, I don't know. It may have been like either Vail, Colorado, or even the World Championship in Nomea, New Caledonia. And why was it my favorite? Oh, it was because of the parents. It had nothing to do with the climbing. The parents, we form our own little union everywhere that we go to support each other and each other's kids. And it's just the community aspect is absolutely wonderful. And the climbing destinations are beautiful, always in beautiful remote locations.
Shauna's popped up. We've demoted Shauna to participant so she can watch the answers. Do you get nervous watching Kai when he's competing?
Much more nervous than him. Not just Kai, but the other kids that I've watched grow up in the sport. The parents and I all joke that we pass each other chalk bags so we can kind of chalk up because our hands get really sweaty when our kids compete. I think it's worse on us than it is on them. So definitely, they all laugh at me. We all have support groups for each other when our kids are climbing. So definitely, and I think we're much more nervous than the kids are. And even throughout the years, it hasn't gotten any better.
Kumbi is on fire tonight. 10 years ago, would you have seen yourself doing what you're doing today? And how can we get parents into the sport that might not be sure how to support their children?
10 years ago, definitely not. Climbing wasn't even big in our community. I only put Kai into the sport initially because as an ADHD kid, I was trying to just stop him from killing himself, because he would climb everything and he just liked living on the edge a little bit. And climbing let him get that energy out. And so back then, it's something that I was just doing to keep him busy. But the fact that he has embraced it in like every aspect, even with his school, he's going to school for business because he wants to see how he can help and even make a difference in the community a little bit more, even from a business aspect. I definitely couldn't have seen myself here. I know that the hope is through his Climbing for Change organization that we're able to get into more communities to just introduce them to it. We're convinced that if they come into the community, we can get them on some outdoor trips to get them outside. They will get hooked. And once they get hooked on the sport, the rest kind of comes, the travel, the lifestyle, just enjoying something that's different from the norm in the communities that we come from. So hopefully the organization will help with uniting and bring a lot of pieces together in order to introduce more people to it. It's a wonderful sport. You have to at least try it, and then you'll realize how awesome it is.
And it's something that's really important to us as WCS, is being able to support parents who are climbers, but also parents of climbers, and have these resources out there. So I think that's one of the reasons that this topic was so important for our community. Joe says, everyone has a bad day sometimes. How do you know when to challenge your child and when to cuddle them?
I think that's why I said the parenting comes in more. We know our kids better than any. And Kai was always in the driver's seat when it comes to his goals and his careers. That was something I was always adamant about. I didn't want the coaches to decide it. I wasn't going to decide that for him. He would set up the goal, and we would get coaches to kind of design training programs to help him to reach the goals. And I would push him always in order to do it. But when you're pushing, you can see when it turns from determination and something that they're trying to break through to something that's kind of breaking their spirits. And you can almost see that in their eyes and in their demeanor. And I think that the second that we see that that's the case, it's time to kind of pull them back. I pulled Kai back in 2018 while he was on the World Cup circuit. I saw in his eyes that he was not enjoying it anymore. We were a couple of competitions in, and I basically pulled the plug and told him it was time to go home. And I did that because the U.S. team wasn't traveling as much as a group back then. And we weren't as organized as they are even this year now. And I think as a parent, it's important. Yes, they want to climb. Yes, they want to enjoy it. But if they're not having fun, you have to pull the plug. At least just give them a moment to regroup.
So ultimately that kind of role as manager as well for that aspect.
No one knows your kid better than you do. So definitely.
And Ian S, also in the Q&A, sort of a follow-up on this one. How did you help Kai manage his training and keep him motivated?
Kai had a schedule. Kai's brain would come and go. If he didn't have something with every moment what he was supposed to do, he would forget what he was supposed to do like 2 seconds later. He graduated from high school actually valedictorian, so academics was always important, but everything was on a schedule. And we literally had playtime on the schedule, hang out with your friends time on the schedule for him to just kind of keep it all together. Because I agree, when kids are training at a high level, they're in school, They still need to be kids. It's a lot. And for us, it helped to kind of put it all on a schedule to make sure that there was time for everything, each day, as well as times during the day when things would actually occur.
Sean is coming to get involved in the question asking too. We've got one from Andrea saying, how can we reduce the extent to which parental income has an effect on the success and opportunities for an enthusiastic child?
This is something that varies country to country, because I realize in some countries there's much more support from the government. Like with the United States, we have to fundraise. And the truth is, I think it comes down to federations will have to help us with figuring out whether it's sponsors, trying to get more fundraisers through different organizations to help households that are basically, if you can't afford to do some of the comps. This is a really important question, because I think in like 2013, before Kai started getting some sponsor help, I had spent $15,000 in a year just for him to travel, for him to compete, for him to train with coaches. And I'm a single mom. And that money, I think it may have been worse because Kai has never had a team or a coach in his area. His coaches were always between like 600 to 1,200 kilometers away. And so we've always had to kind of travel for him just to train. And so, to be honest, with costs like that, we have to have more support from sponsors, from federations, something that is more widespread, or even different organizations that are willing to. One of the things that Kai is going to do is actually provide scholarships, or if it's well, this is increased diversity, but if it's diverse populations, they're having problems with doing some of the comps, they can apply and to provide some of the scholarships to actually help with some of the comp costs. Because it turns out that it's not always the best climbers, but it's the best climbers that can afford it. And that's not something that you want if it's an Olympic sport and we're actually trying to do well internationally.
I
had someone just commented that they spent $20,000 on that Noumea trip, and I believe that the plane tickets alone were thousands.
It's I think it's often referred to as quite a cheap sport, and then I truly don't necessarily believe that, especially when it comes to competing and traveling on the world circuit. You know, it's not cheap at all. I've got a few questions for you on some of the topics you've already touched on, and for me, I grew up climbing, and then my dad started climbing just after me, and like he's been such a guiding light in my life as well as my climbing career, and I've literally just been sat here nodding along to everything you've been saying without the camera on. So I wanted to ask you, what is your view on education? And it sounds like Kai was very motivated to like stick with his education, but some of the things my dad and I have both been asked over the years is like, how do you motivate your children to kind of stick with school and stay educated as well as pursuing a passion? And for me, my dad did a really good job of striking that balance. And when I was really young, I wasn't allowed to go climbing until my homework was done. I had to keep my grades up, I had to do well. So obviously I was like an A-star student because I wanted to go climbing all the time, not for any other reason. But what are your thoughts around that, and what's your advice for people in that situation?
I think you sound like Kai. The straight A's for Kai was his way of suckering me, because he was not allowed to climb, train, compete unless his work was done, unless his grades were good, the behavior was good. And whenever he didn't do well on assignments, we had to go back over them at home. So he figured it was better to do it once and get an A on it so that he didn't have to do it a second time with me. So it was something similar going on. Yes. But from the time that Kai started climbing, I always stress there has to be life beyond climbing. If it's basketball or football, they can get $1 million contracts. So, once it's over, they can still live on it for life. That's not going to happen with climbing. And so putting all of your eggs in the basket of just being a professional climber and I want to, live in the crag, well, as long as you don't plan on having a family or kids, because kids aren't going to live out of a van. You know, 2-month-old kids, 2-year-old kid, they're just not going to live out of a van with you. And so I always tried to figure out how he can kind of have, you can enjoy the sport, but you have to keep thinking about how are you going to live once, you know, that's not income producing, or it's not something that you're no longer on the top of your game. How are you going to live? And so there are ways that you can basically merge both. And I kind of always encouraged him to get the education and continue climbing, but get the education so that you can figure out how to merge working, whether it's working remotely. And even before, there are remote jobs that you can do and you can continue climbing, but you have to think ahead instead of just in the moment. And the education was always the piece that I thought would allow him to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that it sounds so similar to a lot of conversations I've had with my father. And, you know, the education gives you options. And I think like now climbing, it is growing and it is becoming a sport where more people can make a living out of it. And I sure didn't think I could be a professional climber, but I wanted to know I had options. And then there was always that reality that you could get injured and not climb anymore. And then what? So I totally agree with like the value of education, and a lot of what you're saying there kind of reminds me of conversations I had with my dad about balance and understanding the balance between schoolwork and climbing and friends, and kind of seeing all the things that in your life that you need to balance. That's still through climbing, but it's not an easy lesson. And is that something that you think you've had to kind of work on with Kai to understand as well?
It started at 10. Kai did homeworks on airplanes, because even if we were going to a competition, the work had to be done. So if you have the younger climbers and you start them young with understanding how to balance all of it, it's not a problem as they're getting older, with high school getting closer to leaving, when they get to make their own decisions. It's kind of ingrained in them.
Yeah.
And literally at the competitions, everyone would be running around playing, and Kai would be sitting getting tutored in order to do his work. And so I think that it starts kind of young with integrating just that importance, because why do you have to choose? I was proud of him that at a pivotal point in his career, where do I train hard and go for the Olympics? Because I mean, when he graduated from high school, he was national champion for the US with sport climbing. And he had to make a decision. Do I go to college, or do I focus on trying to train for the Olympics? I was very proud of him when he made the decision to prioritize college, because at the end of the day, what he told me is there will be another Olympics and the mountains will still be there, but a full scholarship at one of the top colleges internationally, he said, that's not going to be there.
That's not going
and
to
so
work.
I was very proud of him for making that decision.
Another question I think both my dad and I get asked quite a lot is, you know, as young people, we hit the teenage years and there's a lot of distractions that come into play, and a lot of people fall out of sport at that age. And I guess my question is, as a parent, what's your advice for people with teenage children that are getting distracted? I'm going to just label it as that.
People always used to ask, they used to warn me, but if you let him do too much and do so much, he'll get bored and he may want to stop. And my response to them was, if he wants to stop, then he stops. I was never married to the sport. I was married to his long-term happiness and just enjoying what he was doing. And so as long as it's still bringing joy to you and it's something that you love to do, then I'm going to encourage it. But if kids decide that it's something else that they want to do, I want him to be happy first. And there's so many other different ways to just spend our life. And I want them to spend it just doing something that they love to do. So if they fall out of love with it, move on to something else. And I would be supporting the next big thing for whatever else it is that he gets into. So it was never just climbing. We want them to be happy.
Sure. I think Kai and I are both very lucky to have such supportive parents. Everything you're saying, I've heard very similar from my own dad, and you know, he has been such a guiding light in my life, and still is. You know, I bring him to be like, Dad, I've got this climbing project and I can't figure it out. I send him a video and he comes back with like beta, you know, and or I just ring him to like tell him about my day and see if he can figure out, you know, whatever's going on. And from chatting to Kai recently, you know, it seems like he's got very much the same relationship with you, where he can literally come to you with anything. So yeah, I think that's absolutely incredible. And I've thought you've mentioned the Olympics at times, and I was interested to know what you think the Olympics and the sport growing in general is undeniable. You know, it's kind of alarming at how fast our sport's growing. Can you see that having an impact on young climbers, and what is that, and what do we kind of need to be watching out for?
Oh, it's definitely going to have an impact on young climbers, because young climbers will come into the sport because they want to be the next big thing, the Olympic gold medalists. And with those high aspirations and just training at a really high level, they'll want to prioritize that even over school. They'll want to prioritize that. Injuries are going to be more prevalent and more problematic in the sport. They're just every pitfall. You look at gymnastics, look at any sport where you have young kids training at a high level at a young age, and there are dynamics that are going to be introduced to the picture that could be troublesome if you're not watching them and monitoring and keeping an eye on it. I think the Olympics is a wonderful thing. I just think that there are a lot more dynamics that are going to come with the pictures, and federations, parents, everyone is going to have to step up and do their job to keep it positive, I think, with the sport. And I think it's going to be a challenge, but it's going to take everyone to pitch in order to solve the different problems that are going to be associated with that challenge.
I totally agree, and I didn't know the answer to that question myself, and was fascinated to hear what you had to say, because like living it firsthand and seeing kind of the transformation the sport's going through, it's kind of overwhelming at times how fast it's growing. But I think that positivity is really important for the development, and you know, that's what we wanted to do with the symposium when we set that up way back. It was all about positive development, and I think there's so many people in the sport who are passionate now and really care about that development, so that's amazing. A few of the things I've picked up on is that you talk a lot about positivity, happiness, and healthy. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask for your top 3 tips to parents for raising positive, happy, and healthy climbers.
Top 3 tips. Well, that's a hard one, Shauna.
I'm sorry. I did not give you any warning on that.
I know. I think one thing is they have to be present and in tune with their kids. You can't push your goals or wants or desires on them. You have to kind of let them be in the driver's seat at all times. If they're motivated, then push, work with them, hike long hikes to be on the side of the crag with them, you know, hang out in the dirt with them all day. You know, all those special things that come with the sport, support it. But if they're not motivated, for me, I always want to ask why. So that's just with being in tune. Because if it's just a matter of they're losing faith in themselves, then no, I'm going to motivate them that they're okay with it. But if they're losing interest in the sport, that's another thing.
And it's hard to know the difference, I think.
You have to talk. You have to talk. That open dialogue has to be there. And I think that with Kai, it wasn't talking to him, it was watching him. I could see it in his eyes when he wasn't feeling it, when he wasn't enjoying it, and then that change actually occurs in him. So that's what I think I've always been in tune with.
Yeah, and that's a credit to what you're saying about being present and aware. Like, you could see that, and you were able to see that because of the trust that you had, and he's able to show that in front of you. So I think that being present, I totally agree with that and understand what you're saying there.
Yes. Oh my God. Top 3. I don't know about others, Shauna.
I
I
feel
don't
like
know.
you
That is
just had
such a
3 in there. You had so
oh
much information.
good. That gets me off the hook. Perfect.
We could just throw it back at Shauna.
Yeah.
We've got a few more questions in the chat, actually. I won't let Shauna totally monopolise you, just
Sorry.
because
I
there's
got carried away.
lots of people who've got questions for you. One of them is from Rachel. What do you think our industry and community can do to better support climbers of colour?
That is a loaded one. I think one of the first things is understanding why we're reluctant to enter the sport to begin with. I say understanding is key for starters. It begins outside of the climbing community, things that minorities just encounter in everyday life. And if we, like in the United States, if we're hesitant, I don't know if you've read any of the, or listened to any of the like podcasts where we've talked about the racial issues kind of here in the US and things that we experience. But if I have to train my 6-year-old how to keep himself safe so that he can just make it home every day, and literally it starts that young. There isn't an African-American household in the United States that has not had to talk with their, especially Black boy at a young age. Is certain things they're conditioned just to stay safe from a young age. So there are safety concerns, there are just discomfort issues that they're automatically going to feel when they go into a space where they're even less represented. In the US, there's been a lot of pushback with supporting changing the names of even route names. A lot of our crags in the US are located in areas where they're Confederate flags every other house. And so if we have to travel to the crags and we're passing this when we get there, if we're getting certain things that happen in the cities as we're trying to get to the crag, and then we get to the crag and there are routes to climb like racists or slave drivers, I mean, how do we really escape? It's tough to kind of escape some of the things where it's continuous, you know, just reminders that are there. So supporting, understanding what some of the problems are so that when you see these different threads that come up about even things that people would think it's simple as changing a route name, that's something that should be supported in understanding the impact that it actually has. When you see behaviors that are not right or consistent, I think 99% of the things that have happened to us have happened because people sit by and they're idle because they don't want to get involved. To be honest, by saying nothing, it's almost letting someone think that their behavior is okay. And so that's a huge part of it, just speaking up and letting people know that it's not okay. If they have diversity programs that are coming to your area, because more gyms are starting to do it, we're bringing the programs in, volunteer to participate in them. Because the truth is, when you first walk into a space and you're the only one, and Kai was like the only Black person in the sport that he would ever see at any of the competitions, like forever. When you first walk in, you're a little hesitant. But if you're greeted with the warm and the smiling faces that's welcoming you in, and they're helping you and they're working with you, it eases and takes some of that off. So being part of the solution on a regular basis with just welcoming, because people, we've heard it repeatedly. I don't know why people say that we need to do all of this just to bring more minorities into the sport. I mean, the outside is free and it's open. And it's like, it might be free and open, but you're scared to even open the door because of the things that you deal with just in regular life. So just being a part of just that, rolling out that real red carpet to let people know that, no, it is a safe place and we want you here. It's a great community and we want you to be a part of it. I think all of that is important. We have climbing gyms that are asking members to add $1 to their membership to support some of the programs, because in order to bring them in, When money is a problem, you can't pay $100 a month for some of the membership and some of the equipment to even do it through the gym, or even $1,200 to do the outside trips weekly. So when they have programs where they're trying to help offset it to bring more people in, think about donating that $1 a month towards the program. It's just that I think Kai is a good person overall and a young professional because he's benefited from the diversity that he's experienced in traveling the world. Every place that he goes, whether it's England, whether it's in South Africa, whether it's in China or Japan, the cultures are different. He's learned to appreciate the differences. He's learned to understand that just because you're different doesn't mean that you're not better, you're not worse, you're just different. And he's learned to just love the different aspects of so many different cultures. And I think that the fact that our climbing community is primarily white could benefit from the same thing. Just having the different perspectives, learning, appreciating, and just learning some new things in life that they may even be able to incorporate, because we've incorporated some of the things that we've gotten from our travels. So great question. I know it's a long answer, but yeah.
No, thank you for giving so much time to it. I think it's something that in the UK we don't necessarily address so head on. And actually we're living at a really interesting time where it's a really rich space to have these conversations. And probably just a shout out now to a couple of the organizations that have started fairly recently within the community. Climbers Like Me, that's come out of the team behind the Women's Trad Festival, and United We Climb, that Rachel has started here in the UK as well, just seeking to diversify those voices occupying the space. Question from Elaine about, you mentioned earlier how you basically had to go and do your own sleuthing work to diagnose what Kai might have had and how that injury worked. How do you find the resources that help you with the parenting and making sure that you're keeping your child on track?
I think the resources are scarce because climbing is such a young sport. Medicine is not an exact science. It's more empirical. It's more they have to see the symptoms, and they've realized that when these things line up, it's usually this. But the problem is that body of research does not exist as much for climbing, for them to understand and for it being written in the journals to be able to pull it, because it was only one article that was there about a climber, and it happened to be what it was for Kai. So I think it's important to understand that our doctors don't understand our sport well enough to know just the wear and tear that gets placed on every part of their body. So if you suspect that there are problems and you're bringing them in, you may have to explain that a little bit more so that they're motivated to look a little bit deeper and just understand, no, every single muscle in the body is strained. It's a high level of stress that's actually put on it. And so you just may have to explain that a little bit more. And especially, like we said, with that healing process, they're released a little too soon. A normal person, their bone heals in 6 weeks. You can resume activities. You cannot resume climbing on your fingers and they just healed right at six weeks. The new bone just can't handle all that. So I think communicating with those doctors, everyone's not nerdy like me. I'm going to go through the research articles. I help doctors write those articles and talk to them the statistics that go into a lot of it. So I'm very comfortable in that space. But just finding doctors that are a little more familiar with climbing, communicating with them to help them understand the sport a little bit better, and just being a little bit more vigilant with making our kids wait, because they want to come right back. They want to climb. They love climbing. But the goal is to climb long term. And if you rush that too quickly, it's not going to happen. Re-injury is going to occur.
We've had a topic that's come up on multiple channels. It was actually some of the questions that were submitted in advance, is as most parents are kind of struggling on a daily basis with managing their children and social media and all of those kind of pressures that there are growing up in the world we have today, with the extra additional pressures of, you know, being famous, being a public figure, how's that been for you as a parent? And maybe we'll ask Shauna afterwards about media pressures as well.
I have been in Kai's account since he was 10. When he first opened up all of his social media accounts, they sync to him and they sync to me. I think you have to stay in it that way just to kind of help. And even once he got grown, I gave him that option to back it out. And he was like, oh, no, absolutely not, because I'll help him with sorting out, okay, you need to respond to this. This is a business something. And I kind of help him with it. So I think it's important to help our kids understand that social media is like reality TV, and to almost not take it too seriously sometimes, because they're mean. They're just outright vicious, I think, in the world of social media. You can post something, and because you say it's slightly off, you know, just one word different, the comments and everything that comes in, I mean, they're horrific. And helping them to be able to understand not to embrace that or take any of that, you know, personally, or to just allow that to just change their perception of themselves is a little bit tough. I know Kai got attacked a few months ago because he posted an ad with a little almost commercial with milk, because he's always grown up drinking milk. And they were, oh my God, I can't believe you, the cows are raped and you're supporting that. And it's like, I mean, but I like milk, I'm sorry. But the types of the viciousness of the comments is definitely something that parents should be helping them with, watching and looking over, to just help them keep it in perspective. And don't be afraid to delete, because I will delete it in a second when it gets too bad. And I will tell them, Kai didn't delete it, I did. Because we're not going to go down this path. This is positive, or we're going to keep it positive. I'm usually the one that comments. Kai doesn't. Kai lets it all go over his head. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to tell them. He's like, Mommy, no. He tries to stop me from responding sometimes. So I don't know. I have done a good job at getting him to keep it in perspective, to the point that he's better with it than I am, that he usually has to dial me back and get me to not. So I don't know. I think we've almost had a role reversal there with the mama bear protecting my kid. I know they didn't just say that to my baby, you know, and I'll be ready to say. So it's funny. I help him balance it, but I think he's the adult sometime with it.
Any insights from you, Shauna?
Oh wow, this is a big topic, and I mean, I've got a lot to say when it comes to discussing social media, and I almost feel like we could do a whole other talk on guiding young people, especially in sport, through dealing with social media. But the difficulty is that it's constantly changing and adapting, and it's impossible to be advanced at understanding social media because of the rate at which it changes, you know. But I think so much of what Connie is saying I relate to, because the way my dad was with me, and I think it is down to being present and understanding, and also understanding what your values are as a person. And I know that's getting kind of deep, but if you can understand where you hold your self-worth, like what you value, suddenly when you post something that is meaningful, and you know, every post you put out there, you're putting it out to people to interpret however they want. So when you're getting the backlash, if you understand kind of who you are and what's important to you and why that message is important, then it's a lot easier to deal with the criticism. But for sure, there are times where I get super upset when people are saying mean things, which happens, and when people are attacking me for saying something that I believe in, or saying that I should not post anything political or only post climbing photos.
Stick to climbing, right?
Exactly. And oh my goodness, I get that a lot, like stick to climbing, like basically shut your mouth and smile. And I'm like, well, not shut your mouth and smile. You can't do both of those things. But you know, you get what I'm saying. So yeah, it's hard, and it's a difficult conversation, but I do believe that if we understand who we are, where we hold our self-worth and what we value, then it's a lot easier to be in that space. And I think so much of that for me comes from the way I was brought up, not just my dad, like my whole family, making me understand who I was and what I believed in, what I was passionate about. And it sounds exactly like you've had that relationship with Kai, Connie. I don't want to speak for you, but.
And Kai's aunts are the same way. They're right. So if I'm telling him, he can turn to them, and usually they're going to give very similar advice as far as him staying grounded. And the other thing is, a lot of these people making these comments are hiding behind anonymity. I mean, they're not public. We don't know who they are. And so you can say whatever you want when you're anonymous. So it's like, it's easier. They're not brave in making the comments. It's almost sometimes even cowarding that they can do it. And then you look and their account is private, or it's a picture. You can't even see who they are or what they do. And so you have to just remember and keep that in perspective, that sometimes they might just be gaslighting just because they can.
Yeah, for sure. And I get a lot of messages privately, and often, like, there was some recently when I was posting around the Black Lives Matter movement, and I got a lot of kind of people attacking me, and nearly all of them I replied to, and 9 out of 10 replied back going, I didn't think you'd respond, sorry, I was just having a bad day. One person even said my cat died and I was really pissed off, and I just took it out on you, I'm really sorry, carry on. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry your cat died. It's like, really?
Yeah, social, it's a special place, and especially if the kids are younger, you have to monitor it. You have to keep up with it for them, and definitely do not leave them out there with the vultures in the social media world by themselves.
And I do feel like we've talked a lot about the negativity there, and I do believe social media has the power to inspire, to connect, and it's, like the fact that we're here doing this now on screens, like the world is changing, and it's kind of been fast forwarded significantly over COVID times, and people are on social media and on their computers a lot more, but it does have the power to do such great things. But it's understanding that, and
I think it's much more positive than it is negative. It's just that the negative voices are always loud and proud, and so that it drowns out some of the other things. I think it's much more powerful. You can connect with people from all over the world in different ways. I remember Kai was taking a trip internationally one time, and he switched up the venue. I'm like, well, wait a minute, Kai, you don't have anyone to meet with. He was like, oh, I'll figure that out. He messaged someone, I think from Israel, some of his friends, and he was like, oh, I'm fine. And I'm like, you're fine, but where are you going? Oh, I messaged such and such. They're going to meet me at this crag at this location. He dropped me a ping, and he'll just come and pick me up. So you're going to travel all the way to the other side of the world, where a friend on social media told you they were going to meet you at this ping to pick you up. He was like, yeah, I'm going to be fine. And he was. And so social media, there are wonderful aspects of it, definitely.
Amazing. We're just going to another shout out, actually. Project One Climbing is another fantastic DEI organisation here in the UK. Connie, if we can give you 2 more questions from the audience, and then I'll hand over to Shauna, if that's all right. A sense of, I think you've just been talking about social media, and especially during the times of COVID. How do we encourage our young climbers during these times when there's comp cancellations, shutdowns, hard to get to places? I know that you still have a young climber, even though not a child climber anymore.
I think this is a perfect time for them to return to the roots and their love for climbing. That's the reason why we're in an Airbnb right now on the other side of the country. It's no competitions, but you didn't get into climbing because of competitions. You got into climbing because you loved climbing. So I think it's a perfect time to, especially if you're working remotely, you can take the trips because you're staying away from everyone. You can go to some of the crag areas that are open, that are not as crowded, and just enjoy the sport, enjoy family. I think it's just, and you can get stronger in the meantime because you are actually training. So I just think it's a perfect time to back up and just remember all the reasons why you're in the sport. It's because you love the sport. and you can enjoy it a little more now.
Absolutely. That kind of enforced time for a little bit of soul searching and reflection is something that we've all got to learn to embrace. So many positive, and there's a lot of fangirling going along in various forums at the moment. Everybody is loving your talk, Connie. One final question is, how do you, in all of this, find the Connie time? And what do you do in your Connie time?
I thought I was going to have Connie time when he graduated from high school and went to college, because I thought my main job was over, and so COVID hit and then he came back home. I have accepted that my life is finding, not even just accepted, I love my life. I love the kids. I love the community. And as much as I give them a little bit of crap for the hikes, I enjoy being out and all the new people that I meet. I'm a single mom. All of Kai's grandparents were deceased by the time he was really little. His two aunts are super supportive, but because I'm kind of a one-man band, I don't even see it as sacrifice. I enjoy it. I enjoy what I do, and I love, I guess, where I am. I've learned to enjoy what life, find the positives in all the things that life gives you, instead of just hoping and wishing that it was something else. He'll be back off in college soon enough. And when he's back off and I'm missing him, I'll find some great things to get into myself, like I did when he was away for a moment for the first 2 years. But until then, I'm going to enjoy every moment of them and every moment that I actually have. I think COVID has taught me that a lot more, to just enjoy families and just enjoy all the little things in life that just bring you joy.
I couldn't think of a better note to end on there, Connie. Wow. I think you've raised so many important topics throughout your talk and given a lot of people so much to think about and go away and research. And I think, yeah, there's a lot to take away from that, and so much of it comes down to communication and having good relationships. And I think it really comes across in Kai and who he is and what he's doing, especially with his new organization, and just in the incredible person that he is as well. So it kind of just shines such a great light on you and who you are and what you've given to him as a mother as well. So yeah, thank you so much for being part of our event. It's been a true honor to have you here. I'm sure there'll be lots more questions that we might have to send over that people are going to send through, because I feel like I took up a lot of the question time. Sorry about that. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, and that's the end of this one today, and we will be sending out more information soon on the next events that are coming, but be sure to keep an eye out for them. Thank you so much, Connie.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, and keep an eye on social and things as well, and there's loads of things coming along. We've got loads in the pipeline, so yeah, thanks so much, Connie, and thanks to everyone for coming along, because those questions were fab. I kept thinking of a question to put in the Q&A, and then somebody else would ask it, so yeah, it was really good. Thanks, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody.